We have an active shooter.
Let's go ahead and declare this a mass casualty.
Welcome to Active Shooter, a podcast that covers the whys, the hows, and the aftermath of active shooter and mass casualty events.
They have an active shooter in the building. A second call says they are being attacked.
I've been shot.
1697 Easy, we got shots fired. 4:15 at Route 291. Sounded like an automatic firearm.
Active shooter, reports of an active shooter,
mass casualty incidents.
Thank you for listening.
You are listening to Active Shooter, a podcast that may contain adult themes, explicit language, and graphic depictions of violence. Portions of this show may be traumatic for those under 18. Listener discretion is advised.
This is the CBS News Special Report. I'm Jared Hill in New York. There's breaking news out of Lewiston, Maine, about 40 minutes north of Portland. Police are searching for a mass shooter who reportedly opened fire at least 2 different locations, including a bar and grill and a bowling alley. Multiple law enforcement sources tell CBS News that at least 16 people and perhaps more than 20 have been killed, dozens more injured. The sheriff's office released these photos of the suspect who appears to be holding an AR-style assault rifle.
The shootings in Lewiston, Maine, on October 25, 2023, were deliberate, planned attacks, carried out against 2 businesses that the shooter believed were out to get him in some way. There were several other businesses on the shooter's list of those who had wronged him, although it's unclear whether they were meant to be a part of the attack. The shooter had experienced a severe mental health decline and acted out in concerning manners. He made threats to cause harm, and he was known to have the means and training to carry out his sadistic plans. Those who knew the shooter became worried about his mental state, and they spoke up. Unfortunately, those warnings weren't heeded, and as such, a man with a grudge was able to carry out a horrific act of mass murder against hundreds of unsuspecting and innocent men, women, and children. Today's case is dedicated to the lives and memories of the 13 injured survivors and the 18 shooting victims: Ronald Morin, Peyton Brewer-Ross, Joshua Seal, Brian McFarland, Joseph Walker, Arthur Strout, Max Hathaway, Stephen Votzella, Thomas Conrad, Michael R. Deslauriers II, Jason Walker, Tricia C. Aslin, William Yoon, Aaron Young, Robert Violet, Lucille Violet, William Brackett, and Keith D. McNair.
Active Shooter, the podcast, is a High Five Holly production, and I'm your host, JT. If you've listened to our prior episodes, you know that the Active Shooter podcast team has taken the No Notoriety pledge, and we will not be sharing the real name of the shooters that we cover. We will be giving the shooters a pseudonym and refer to them by that name throughout the episode. This will help in clearing up any confusion in the story, while remaining true to our pledge and not naming the shooter by their actual name.
We will refer to today's shooter as Vic. Wednesday, October 25th, 2023, was a slightly cooler evening, with temps hovering in the mid-50s. The night sky was clear in Lewiston, Maine, which is located within Androscoggin County. The Just-in-Time Recreation Center was bustling with activity, as there was both a youth bowling league event and a cornhole tournament for the deaf taking place there. It's not clear precisely how many people were at the rec center, but there were a lot of people who came out for the respective events, and there isn't a single one in attendance who could have been prepared for the manner in which their lives were forever changed. "40-year-old Vic arrived at the rec center shortly before 7 p.m. He parked his 2013 Subaru Outback at the recreation center and selected a firearm from the 3 he brought for the attack. Vic chose a Ruger SFAR 308 semi-automatic rifle, leaving behind a Smith & Wesson M&P 15 .223 caliber semi-automatic rifle, which wasn't used, and a Smith & Wesson M&P 40 caliber semi-automatic pistol. The Ruger was specifically equipped with a flashlight and extended magazine. As soon as he entered the center, Vic opened fire. Within moments, 911 calls were placed, alerting authorities to an active shooter. 4 minutes after the first call, law enforcement was on the scene, but Vic had already fled. In his wake, he left 7 deceased shooting victims, including 6 men and 1 woman.
Well, we were inside and just normal night of bowling, and out of nowhere he just came in and there was a loud pop. Thought it was a balloon. I had my back turned to the door. And as soon as I turned and saw that it was not a balloon, he was holding a weapon, I just booked it down the lane, and I slid basically into where the pins are and climbed up in the machine and was on top of the machines for about 10 minutes until the cops got there. Over 10, where at least I knew they were shots. And then when I got on top of the bowling machine, it was a lot of ruckus back there, so I don't really know from that, but I heard the first one. It was probably 15 feet behind me. I mean, he was close. Very close. Nothing, no one close. I mean, I'm pretty sure I knew one guy but I'm not going to say we're friends. I just knew him, friendly. I've seen him there before. But I just went there, just to bowl by myself, and yeah, I wasn't even there 10 minutes.
10 minutes?
Yeah, I just walked in the place. I was putting on my bowling shoes when it started. So, I've been barefoot for 5 hours.
Outside of the rec center, at a nearby shooting range, a few police officers were shooting when they heard the sounds of gunfire, not their own, coming from what sounded like the just-in-time rec center. The plainclothes officers rushed to the scene without a moment's hesitation. Other first responders noticed straight away that there were several rifle cartridges scattered on the floor of the center. 12 minutes after the first 911 call, several more calls started pouring in, reporting another active shooter at a separate location.
Captain, you have a second one. Second active shooter is Schwangies.
This shooting was at Shemenji's Bar and Grill restaurant. You see, Vic didn't flee the first scene to run and hide. His bloodlust wasn't satisfied yet. He entered the bar, and just like at the rec center, he opened fire, shooting the Smith & Wesson M&P 40 caliber semi-automatic pistol wildly, before turning and running from the bar. Once again, the police response was swift. Officers were on scene within 2 minutes of the initial 911 call, yet Vic was long gone. 8 additional victims were murdered at this location. 7 men inside of the bar, and 1 man just outside of the bar. Another 3 people were shot at the bar and rushed to the emergency room, though sadly, each later died as a result of their injuries. Meanwhile, Vic was on the lam. Police were quickly able to capture an image of him from the surveillance system, and the photo was broadcasted to the public with a bolo warning. A local shelter in place was ordered in Lewiston proper, and naturally, any schools, specifically local colleges, were put on lockdown. Classes the following day were canceled, and before long, the lockdown order was extended to Bowdoin on October 26th, when the shooter was still at large. Because of the proximity to the Canadian border, security was beefed up at the points of entry. The ATF and FBI were called in to assist in the manhunt and investigation. At 9:26 p.m., Vic's sister called Police Chief David St. Pierre with the Lewiston Police Department. She told the chief that she believed her brother was the shooter and she wanted to report it. About a half hour later, Lewiston PD was contacted again, this time by officers with the Lisbon Police Department. Lisbon PD was reporting that they came across a Subaru that was identified in a bolo. The car was parked at the Pajepscot boat launch, which sat alongside the Androscoggin River in Lisbon. Maine State Police Detective Connor Walton was tasked to perform a reverse vehicle search on the shooter, and the results came back showing that Vic had a 2013 white Subaru Outback, and the plates matched. The car was there. Vic was not. On October 26th, police issued an arrest warrant for Vic. He was being charged with 8 counts of murder, one for each victim that was known at the time. The following day, police dive teams and an ROV, or remotely operated vehicle, were dropped into the river near where Vic's vehicle was discovered. Nothing of evidentiary value was located. Later that day, at 7:45 p.m., Vic's body was found, situated close to his former workplace, a recycling center, which also sat along the Androscoggin River. The recycling center was actually searched the previous evening, but nothing was found. The owner called police back on the 27th to ask them to return and search again, but this time inside of an overflow parking lot and in some storage trailers. He intimated that Vic was very familiar with the property and could likely find an obscure place to hide. Vic's body was located inside of an unlocked trailer that was loaded with metal and plastic scrap. Because it wasn't obvious that this lot and trailers were owned by the recycling center, they were across the street after all, police didn't search the trailers the night before, not knowing it was the recycling center's property. Vic died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, and the subsequent autopsy indicated that he likely died about 8 to 12 hours before he was found. Back at Vic's house, a note was located and thought to be a possible suicide letter. It was reportedly addressed to someone important to Vic and included bank account numbers and the passcode to his phone. As is almost always the case, each firearm Vic possessed was legally purchased. Despite serious reported mental health issues, there was absolutely nothing barring this monster from arming himself to the teeth so he could commit the most dastardly act known to man. Ronald Ron G. Marin was born on May 23, 1968, and the 55-year-old had been employed with Coca-Cola since 1989. Ron was known as a conscientious and loyal employee and man who had been married to his soulmate Lynn Marin since 1990. Ron leaves behind his wife and 2 adult children, Amy and Eric. Peyton Brewer Ross was born on January 31, 1983. The 40-year-old pipe fitter leaves behind fiancée Rachel and their little girl, Elle. 36-year-old Joshua Seal was born on September 9, 1987, and was a certified deaf interpreter, as well as the director of interpreting services at Pine Tree Society. Joshua married the love of his life, and they had been together forever, but married 4 years. The couple had 4 children, including a 12-year-old, 9-year-old, 6-year-old, and 4-year-old. Brian M. McFarland was 41 years old and was raised in the greater Portland area and attended the Governor Baxter School for the Deaf. Brian was incredibly proud, rightfully so, of his greatest life's achievement, which was becoming the first deaf person in the state of Vermont to earn his CDL, or commercial driver's license. Motorsports were his passion, including RC racing, snowmobiling, and motorcycling, but he also thoroughly enjoyed a good camping trip and spent time with his friends. 57-year-old Joseph Joe Lawrence Walker was born on April 17, 1966. The manager of Schemengees Bar and Grill and the Station Grill restaurant, Joe thrived when he was working with and meeting new people, and he genuinely loved his job. Joe leaves behind a wife, 4 daughters, and 2 sons. Arthur Artie Fred Strout was born on April 30th, 1981, and was described as a true friend, a devoted husband, father, son, uncle, and brother to many. Loved ones say that the 42-year-old loved to laugh, and was actually known for his laugh, which was more like a giggle. Artie married his best friend, Christy, on March 5th, 2016, and the couple shared a blended family of 5 children. 35-year-old Max A. Hathaway was born on May 20th, 1988. He earned a Bachelor's of Science degree in Business Administration and Finance from the University of Southern Maine. Max's wife was pregnant with their 3rd daughter when he was murdered. Max's wife was pregnant with their 3rd daughter at the time of his murder. Stephen M. Votsala was born on November 18, 1977, and attended elementary school at Beverly School for the Deaf before eventually graduating from North Shore Vocational School in 1996. 45-year-old Stephen was employed with the United States Post Office as a letter carrier in Boston, Massachusetts from 1998 to 2022, and then in Lewiston until the time he was killed. He is survived by his cherished wife, Megan, and their daughter. Thomas Ryan Conrad was a 34-year-old who was born in Cooville, Whidbey Island in Washington State. An Army vet who served in northern Iraq, Thomas was currently employed at the Just In Time restaurant. A die-hard New England sports enthusiast, he leaves behind one precious daughter. 51-year-old Michael R. Delorier II was born on February 12, 1972. Known as Mikey by close friends and family, he was employed with St. Mary's Hospital, Covenant Health, for 30 years, but at the time of the shooting, he was a network engineer for WG Tech. Mikey is survived by his true love, Stacy, and their 2 children. Jason Adam Walker was born on December 4th, 1971. He graduated from Oak Hill High School in 1990 and immediately enlisted in the Maine National Guard, but most of his work life was in the building trades. 51-year-old Jason is survived by 2 sons and his loving wife. Tricia C. Aslan was a busy 53-year-old woman who was always on the go, and often sacrificed her free time in order to give back to others, particularly through the Susan G. Komen and the Make-A-Wish Foundations. Tricia is survived by her treasured son. 44-year-old William Arthur Young was a veteran of the United States Air Force who was an auto mechanic for the past 12 years leading up to the shooting. He will always be remembered for his laugh, which was contagious. William leaves behind his wife Cynthia, daughter Lauren, and stepdaughter Kayla. The youngest of the victims, 14-year-old Aaron Jacob Young, was just a freshman at Winthrop High School, and he was taken from this world far too young. The young man was an exceptional student who was considerate and kind, genuinely concerning himself with seeing to other people's happiness. Aaron enjoyed playing video games, golfing, and bowling. His father, William Yoon, the man he idolized, was shot and killed alongside his son, the man he worshipped. 76-year-old Robert Bob Edward Violet, a United States Navy veteran, was a retired Sears mechanic and recently employed by Lee Cars. Along with the absolute love of his life, he was a father to 3 sons and a grandfather. Bob was shot and killed while out with his wife Lucille. 73-year-old Lucy Marie Violet was a sweet and gentle woman who was known to be the most inviting person, accepting each individual for who they were. She was a long-standing employee for Lewiston Public Schools, working as a secretary for 52 astonishing years. Lucy and Bob are survived by their sons and grandchildren. William Billy Frank Brackett was born on September 1st, 1975, in Hamilton, Ohio. Proud to be a member of the deaf community, Billy stayed active by fishing and hunting, but he was known to love a good game of cornhole. The 48-year-old is survived by his loving wife Christina and daughter Sandra. 64-year-old Keith McNair was only a few years into retirement when he was murdered. He lived in Florida but was visiting his son Breslin in Lewiston. Deciding to go out for an evening, Keith and Breslin had dinner at the bar and grill together, before Breslin had to leave for a meeting. He was supposed to return to the bar after the meeting, but he never made it back to his dad before an active shooter changed his world forever. Keith retired in the fall of 2020 from the U.S. National Park Service at the Virgin Islands National Park, as well as the Virgin Islands Coral Reef National Monument. He is survived by his only child and many other friends and family. Vic was born on April 4th, 1983, in Bowdoin, Maine, which is approximately 2.5 hours north of Boston. His father was a rural mail carrier who also maintained a small farm where he milled and sold lumber. Vic's dad passed away in 2001, and after his death, Vic assumed ownership of his father's estate. It's been reported that Vic's family was one of the most affluent in Bowdoin. However, the town is of a smaller scale. From 2001 to 2004, Vic studied engineering technology, but didn't graduate from the University of Maine. Vic was a petroleum supply specialist in the United States Army Reserves, and he'd achieved the rank of Sergeant First Class. Though he'd been active since December of 2002, he wasn't ever deployed into combat. He married in 2005, but he and his wife split up a mere 2 years into the marriage. The couple had a son during their brief union, and shared custody after the divorce. About 6 months before the shooting, Vic's ex-wife claimed that he, quote, recently picked up about 10 to 15 handguns and rifles from his brother's house. It's unclear whether this was reported to anyone prior to the shooting. Their son, who was an adult by the time of the shooting, also reported concerns about his dad, claiming that he was allegedly hearing voices. Vic's son was clear that his father never threatened anyone, but he was concerned about his dad having the weapons when he was obviously not in a good place with his mental health. On August 5th, Vic took a trip to the Coastal Defense Firearms gun shop. He'd ordered a gun silencer online and was there to pick up his purchase. When he arrived, the store representative asked Vic if he'd ever been committed to a mental health facility, or if he was ever, quote, adjudicated as a mental defective, to which Vic replied yes, he was. The store refused to complete the transaction, and Vic was sent on his way. A month later, the sheriff's office was sent a letter that indicated Vic might, quote, snap and commit a mass shooting. The letter was sent by a fellow reserve soldier, and officials requested a welfare check on Vic due to their concerns about his behavior. Specifically, they indicated that Vic, quote, is having psychotic episodes where he is hearing voices that are insulting him, calling him a pedophile, and saying that Vic was, quote, making threats to shoot up a National Guard building. Yet another soldier indicated that Vic assaulted him when the pair were driving back from a casino. A welfare check was conducted on September 15th, but Vic wasn't at home. A File 6, which is similar to a Be on the Lookout or BOLO, was issued. In addition to the File 6, authorities were told to approach Vic with caution, citing Vic as, quote, suffering from psychotic episodes and hearing voices. The following day, on the 16th, a deputy went to Vic's residence again and knocked several times, once again to no avail. The deputy reached out to Vic's unit commander, who claimed that he, quote, no longer had any weapons from the reserve unit, and the commander felt that Vic was best left alone. On September 17th, another deputy contacted Vic's brother, who informed them that his siblings' weapons were all stored on the family farm, locked in a safe, but that they planned to move them. The deputy asked Vic's brother to call him back if they determined that Vic might harm himself or others. It seems numerous efforts were made to check in on Vic. Something didn't feel or seem right, and it was reported and acted upon. Sadly, police never managed to make that contact with Vic, and we know all too well how this story ends. The summer before the shooting, the exact month and date aren't known, Vic did spend 2 weeks in an inpatient mental health treatment facility. It was during that time that Vic was at Camp Smith in New York. After the shooting, Vic's sister, whom we will call Karen, interviewed with Maine State Police Detective Justin Huntley. She wanted to give some background information on exactly who her brother was. The following statements, while not verbatim, have been extracted from the police affidavit. Karen stated that since February of 2023, Vic was in a delusional state following a devastating breakup from his ex-girlfriend, whom he met at a cornhole tournament in Shemangi's Bar and Grill. Karen went on to say that Vic lost an extreme amount of weight and began making concerning statements. He started wearing hearing aids and stopped taking his prescribed medications. She told police that Vic was incredibly interested in guns, particularly handguns and assault rifles, and described a time when her brother was certain that there was a conspiracy against him and people were calling him a pedophile. Karen explained that those things weren't true, but Vic believed it. In fact, he thought the entire family, along with various businesses, were all in on the scheme to convince the world of his pedophilia. The businesses that he thought were out to get him? Goel's Market, Mixer's Nightclub, and Just-in-Time Recreation, and Shemangi's Bar and Grill, the former two being businesses he attacked in the shooting. The shooter's brain was sent to Boston University for testing, including one test to determine if he suffered from chronic traumatic encephalopathy, also known as CTE. The university, which has a research center that is solely focused on CTE research, has described the disease as, quote, progressive degenerative disease of the brain found in people with a history of repetitive head impacts. Some symptoms of CTE include impaired judgment, impulse control problems, aggression, memory loss, confusion, anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, Parkinsonism, and progressive dementia. Unfortunately, the disease can only be diagnosed after death, when the brain can be fully examined and tested. With more research and understanding of this condition, perhaps we can discover a way of testing before it's far too late. The Just-in-Time Recreation Center hasn't reopened, at the time of this recording, but is undergoing remodeling and plans to open again. Hopefully very soon, according to their Facebook page. Shemangi's Bar and Grill is also still closed, but their Facebook page reports that the restaurant does intend to reopen. We all have the unique ability to help prevent such a catastrophic event from happening, if we keep our eyes and ears open and never hesitate to report when something or someone just doesn't seem right. With the delicate balance of mental health reform, education, active shooter training, and common sense gun laws, we may one day realize the dream. The dream that there will be no more active shootings. We pray that love will prevail over hate.
Too many have died. We should say to ourselves, not one more.
In the meantime, we urge our listeners to stay aware of your surroundings and keep in touch with your loved ones. If you see something, say something. You never know how many lives you'll be saving. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Active Shooter, the podcast. Remember, if you see something, say something. There's no telling how many lives you may be saving. A big thank you to Darren Curtis, who composed some of the songs on our show. You can find him online at www.darrencurtismusic.com. Make sure to check us out on social media. You can find us on Facebook at Active Shooter, the podcast, and on Twitter at Podcast Active. Thank you, and be safe.